and welcome. If you have a spare minute, I'd love to share with you in this video what I do around here, who I help, and the core tenets of my approach for naturally managing autoimmune disease. The most efficient way I know of to enter into this conversation is to start by talking a little bit about yours truly. Hi, I'm Lucy Nepstead, and I help adventurers with autoimmune disease to naturally manage their conditions. I'd like to quickly tell you about two versions of myself and how they set me firmly on this path. First, the external narrative about who I am and what I've done. Then, the internal narrative that only I was aware of for most of my life. I have 2 science degrees, a bachelor's in biology from the University of Washington and a master's in environmental science from the University of Minnesota. I spent the vast majority of the last decade working on field sites in the developing world as an environmental researcher, being adventurous. I studied community-run conservation areas in East Africa, tropical parrot nesting in the Bahamas, baboon behavior in South Africa. My master's looked at sustainable agriculture systems in Brazil, and I put that degree to good use in Bali, Indonesia, where I advocated for low emissions policy with a local nonprofit. All of that is just to say that on the outside, I was an adventurous and freedom-loving spirit, ambitious about my career and passionate about the work I was doing, even if it was high pressure at times. But actually, internally, my narrative was completely different because I was dealing with a host of health issues. Virtually since I hit puberty, I dealt with painful and embarrassing cystic acne and hormonal issues that resulted in painful and heavy periods. These were debilitating. I would often have to stay home from school or call into work. In grad school, I began to experience chronic fatigue. No matter how long I slept, I never woke up feeling refreshed or well rested. I'd often try to sneak out of the office early so that I could lie down, and found myself skipping many after-hours opportunities because I couldn't drag myself out of bed. My joints also began to ache, which at first I attributed to exercising too much. I loved the gym, but then I stopped exercising altogether because of how painful they were. I began to have mini panic attacks where I felt out of control of my own body and angry at the lack of answers I was getting from my doctor, who I bothered so much about this. And finally, I noticed that after I consumed gluten or dairy products, all of my symptoms seemed to get much worse. I felt miserable. There was this strange duality I was faced with. The external me, who I so desperately wanted to step into, she was strong, independent, and powerful, and she was ready to change the world, versus the internal me, who felt scared, out of control, and vulnerable, desperately seeking a sense of stability that would allow me to reclaim my health and freedom so that I could take the world by storm. Every day, I would wake up and wonder when my body would give out, when I'd have an answer, when this would all resolve. Finally, one day when I was working in Bali, I experienced a health crisis. The left side of my body went tingling and numb. My nose bled, my joints ached like crazy, and I felt like I'd gotten hit with a truck. I was so exhausted and mentally foggy. I couldn't bring myself to function so well as to sit at my desk, so I decided to finally stop fighting, stop pretending like I could continue on the path I was on, and try to get some real answers. I flew to Singapore and basically paid a doctor to test me for everything I could think of. Cancer, parasites, nutrient deficiencies, and autoimmunity. This was actually an incredibly refreshing experience because I got to have some say in my care, and thankfully it paid off. My tests finally came back with something. They showed that I was positive for autoimmunity and that it was consistent with something like lupus. I was so scared, but also felt a strange sense of relief to finally have information. I told my Balinese dream job, who had coincidentally just offered me leadership on a great new project, that I would have to decline. I packed my bags and headed home to Madison, Wisconsin to work on my health. Once home, I spent the next 2 years using my training in science to pore over the literature on autoimmunity and what those who suffer from it can control to improve quality of life. Through all my searching, my mind was blown by the vast amount of work pointing to an intimate connection between our immune systems and our gut health. This epiphany was thrilling because there are so many tried and true gut therapies available to try. But instead of applying these tools strategically, I put them all to the test, using myself as a guinea pig. I manically sifted through diets, supplements, and lifestyle changes. During these 2 years of relentless experimentation, adhering to templates like the autoimmune paleo diet, I would sometimes feel isolated and restricted, and like I was able to stabilize but not thrive. Likewise, I began to fear that the elusive payoff of improved health and the freedom to live out my true purpose might not ever transpire. Eventually, I came to understand a few major problems with what I was doing and about most of the available natural approaches to autoimmunity, and I'll talk about these more in a minute. But first, let me talk about where I am now. At some point, my hard work paid off. I was able to naturally manage my condition into remission by focusing on my gut. My blood work normalized, and I avoided going on to all medications, even over-the-counter medication like ibuprofen. Now I exercise again. I enjoy a full and wide-ranging nutrient-dense diet with fewer food sensitivities. I feel the least stressed and the most in control of my health than I ever have before. I've traveled again without fear. I have energy for socializing, for exploring, and for creativity. Most importantly, I've been able to reclaim a sense of possibility akin to one I haven't felt since I was a teenager. During my years of experimentation, I rounded out my education by becoming a certified functional nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner so that I can help others to transform their health and reclaim their true life's purpose like I was able to transform mine. Before I talk about what's involved in this process, let's talk about who I think is especially well poised to receive benefit from this approach, so you can make sure you're in the right place. Here are some of the conditions and symptoms this approach is best suited to address. People with any kind of autoimmunity, those who experience digestive distress, burping, bloating, or gas, who have chronic fatigue, joint pain or stiffness, skin problems, cognition problems like brain fog or mood issues, bone density loss, asthma, food sensitivities, or allergic reactions of any kind. Virtually anybody experiencing symptoms related to immune dysregulation is someone who I can help. If any of this sounds like you are in the right place. Let's talk a little bit more about you and where you might be at to make sure we're a good fit. Have you ever felt like you wanted to take advantage of more opportunities at work, with travel, dating, or socializing more, but you feel shackled by your health and unable to pursue these opportunities? Maybe you have a diagnosed autoimmune condition, or maybe you don't have a diagnosis yet, but suffer from symptoms like the ones in the previous slide, and have felt frustrated when your doctor provided zero suggestions for managing these symptoms, let alone managing them naturally. Maybe you're right at the beginning of your healing journey and you have no idea where to start. Or you're interested in trying natural approaches, but the thought of doing something like an elimination diet makes your skin crawl. Maybe you've already tried to follow diets like paleo, gluten-free, etc., but even after all that hard work and discipline, they resulted in little to no improvement for you. Maybe you've seen a practitioner who has already suggested a whole slew of supplements for you, or you've tried random ones that were recommended to you through the grapevine and they still didn't make much of a difference. Maybe you hate the idea of using a medication, prescribed or over the counter, to feel normal. You're fed up with just treating the symptoms and you want to begin to understand and address the true underlying drivers of what's happening in your body. If any of these sentiments sounded familiar, you're definitely in the right place. Trust me, I've been there, and I'm so glad you're here. Now that you are, I want to share with you the single most important guiding principle that I found during my healing escapades that was an absolute game changer. Conceptually, this is something you need to know. A commonly articulated strategy for managing autoimmunity effectively embraces a two-pillar approach. The first is to remove the stressors that are triggering your immune system into overdrive. For example, if you observe that a certain food, mold, synthetic chemical, or environmental stimuli seems to aggravate your symptoms, this pillar would logically say to limit your exposure to this factor. And this pillar is actually where most natural approaches focus the brunt of their strategy on how best to remove what's irritating you. For example, the widely popular autoimmune paleo diet is lodged firmly in this section. One could even make an argument that this diet is so restrictive that it could be construed to live all the way out here to the right. Now, just to clarify, I think this diet is incredibly useful, and it was one of the main tools I used to absolutely get my condition under control. However, without a broader strategy for ensuring this is a temporary stage, it can actually work to increase our limitations over time. So this brings us to the second pillar, which is to support your body's defenses. In other words, to strengthen your body's immune system, nutrient stores, and internal structures in order to make it more resilient. Now, after all of my clinical experience, personal and client, after all of my research insights, this is the place that I would argue is most important and where you need to begin before you jump into removing wide swaths of items from your life. Let's think about a metaphor to help us with this. Say one unlucky gentleman has had the horrible misfortune of breaking his arm. But only he doesn't realize that he's broken his arm. So he goes about trying to live his everyday life like he would otherwise. Every time he tries to put on a sweater, he experiences immense pain in his arm. So he concludes that sweaters are causing his pain, and then he decides to stop wearing them altogether to save himself from this pain. Later, he goes to the kitchen for a snack and decides to reach to open the fridge with his bad arm. He again experiences excruciating pain in his arm. It's broken after all. So he decides to once again remove all refrigerators from his life. In his mind, it's the refrigerator causing him pain. So now he can't wear sweaters or use refrigerators, and he continues on through his day in this manner, being triggered into pain by typically innocuous activities, and then deciding to limit his life to avoid being triggered. Really, what this guy is doing is logical. The external things that are triggering suffering for him are being removed so as not to cause further suffering. This guy is using the remove the stressors strategy alone, which is what a lot of people do. But would you say, from an outsider's perspective, that this is the most efficient way for this poor guy to alleviate his pain or even to heal? Or is there something else he could do to help himself more quickly and more effectively? Might it be more efficient to instead shift his focus to the other strategy first, supporting the defenses? In this case, that would mean first acknowledging that his arm is broken, and then getting it supported and protected by setting it in a cast so that it can properly heal. With a cast on, even if he puts on his sweater or tries to open the fridge, his pain will be substantially lower and his arm will be protected. And over time, his cast will come off and he'll have a stronger structure that will be able to wear sweaters and open fridges without any pain at all. So the same is true for immune symptoms we experience. We need to first understand that our systems are not working correctly, and then we need to set out by protecting and strengthening them to become more resilient first before we go about cutting out the whole kit and caboodle. So let's return to these two pillars and make it into a Venn diagram before we go any further. That's better. So in my practice, I work almost exclusively in the darker colored parts of this chart. I start all the way to the left in the support the defenses sphere and work over to the right gradually as it's needed into this overlap territory where we're still placing a heavy emphasis on strengthening and strategically thinking about removing. Likewise, I pretty much never am over in this right part where we focus solely on removing because I just don't find that it works very well or is very sustainable. So now I hope that you're wondering, well, what does all of this actually translate to in terms of the tactics you apply in service of this goal of support? I'd love to tell you about that now. I'll shrink this important diagram so that we can keep it in mind as we talk about the strategy I use for my clients and how it fits into this paradigm. I use an approach called the Revive in 5 framework. This flagship program constitutes 5 phases that you'll work through in order. If I've learned anything about gut health, it's that order matters. As you may have guessed, the first few steps are all about support. You've got to start with your stomach. Your stomach acid is potentially the single greatest component of your immune system. Confused? Don't worry, I have a ton of free content all about this. But basically, strong stomach acid ensures your food will be safely digested and that any pathogenic invaders will be neutralized before they enter the body. Super important. Next, you've got to nail your nutrients. This means ensuring that the food you're eating is brimming with immune-supportive vitamins and minerals, and that you aren't sabotaging yourself by failing to balance your macronutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. The next step is the first that begins to stray a little bit into this middle section that overlaps with the elimination category, but still mostly focuses on adding in good lifestyle practices meant to strengthen your system. You'll learn to live lucidly. When you're lucid, you're clearly able to understand and express. Lucidly can also mean living luminously or in a light-filled way. In this stage, you'll focus on adding in activities that help to galvanize your faculties so that you're poised to make great decisions. You'll de-stress, detox, sleep soundly, move more, and seek joy. The last step of active intervention is to cleverly cut out. So here we are firmly entrenched in this middle area of overlap between supporting defenses and removing the stressors. So here is where we'll strategically use elimination diets. We'll also consider using tools like functional lab testing to determine if we need to think about using antimicrobials to give your system a reset. But while we do this, we are not dropping the support pillar. Rather, we'll keep on supporting while we do the cutting out in a very targeted manner. Finally, we'll work to equip you with tools to help you maintain and continue to make progress, with the understanding that your immune health will always be a dynamic destination. This is not a one and done sort of thing. In order to maintain your progress and ensure that you keep moving forward, it's imperative that you learn how to troubleshoot, what to do when you fall off the wagon, and how to proceed with as much freedom and as few therapies as possible. This way, you won't need to keep spending your hard-earned dollars, your precious time, and your limited willpower in reaction mode every time something beyond your control intervenes. This is where the magic happens. So here's the good news. Everything I've come to understand about the drivers of immune dysfunction mean that it is translatable to absolutely everyone, even you. And my role is to ensure that you don't have to spend years self-experimenting like a mad person, like I did, in order to figure out how to help yourself. You see, after learning about the importance of gut strategy when it comes to managing mine and my clients' health, and after understanding the joys of adventure and freedom afforded by my previous professional life, my practice's core values can really be distilled into just two seemingly unrelated principles. The first is pragmatism. I see the value in approaching health from a practical point of view. What is the long and short of all of the science on the gut in terms of how it can be applied in a way that ensures I'm getting the biggest trade-off for time and effort? Meanwhile, the other part of me, which is perhaps considered the polar opposite, believes in romanticism. I believe individual experience, a sense of mystery and excitement that transports us away from the mundane, are not only treasured aspects of human existence, but can actually serve as crucial components in our healing. Put it all together, and I am a pragmatic romantic. I contend that by leveraging a few pragmatic strategies, you can experience more romance in your life, more flexibility, more freedom, and more mystery. And those things will actually support your health and not take away from it. And so when I'm thinking about my clients and how I can best guide them, this is always at the forefront of my mind in my choices and approach. And I don't mind telling you, if you align with me on this value set, I'm sure we'll get along swimmingly. If not, this is probably not for you. So you've made it this far. If what I've described sounds intriguing to you or like it could help you, I'd like to invite you to hang out for a while and get acquainted with some of the free courses and content available. You've taken a great first step by getting here. Now, I hope you'll allow me to help you get squarely on the path to healing using the Revive in 5 program, which we'll approach with pragmatic romanticism. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around. Bye!